As most of you know, I am terrible at AD carry, but Sivir is one of the easiest AD carries in the game. No crazy mechanics, incredible wave clear, and good AoE damage and scaling. That means even a terrible AD carry player like me can do well with her. Right?
You're kidding me, you stupid ass minions, man.
So for the next 10 hours, I'm gonna try to learn Sivir in 3 steps. First, normal games, second, do some research, and third, play some ranked games. I'm doing this because I'm trying to learn every champion so one day, I can make the greatest Viego video ever. So what runes and build should you go on Sivir? Well, the most common rune on Sivir is Lethal Tempo by far. For your build, you have 2 main options, an Essence Reaver build and a Yuntal Wild Arrows build. The Essence Reaver build is a lot cheaper and makes up for your terrible mana issues, but it does fall off a bit in the late game. Basically, you go Essence Reaver, Navori Flicker Blades, Infinity Edge, Last Whisper, and then Bloodthirster. The Untold Wild Arrow builds is way more expensive and does have some mana issues, but overall scales way better into the mid and late game. You go Yuntal Wild Arrows, Infinity Edge, Navori Flicker Blades, Last Whisper, and Bloodthirster. And going into my first Sivir game, I had a Teemo support. It's okay, Ecor. Everything's gonna be of course. And let me tell you, it only got worse from here. Not to say that I'm a Sivir god or anything right now, but come on.
He blinded when I barriered.
I wish I could say that I scaled up and led the team to victory, but the truth is, that's exactly what happened. Not before a necessary death, of course. Finally though, with a few tanky champions in front of me and my finger on the right click button, I was able to put this champion to the test, and I have to say, my first impressions it feels really good to hit a bunch of people for tons of damage. But remember that thing I said about carrying my team to victory? Well, it's more like I just walked into the enemy's base, destroyed everybody that stood in front of me, and won the game. This is gonna be a fun challenge.
You farm, you win. Easy peasy.
Unfortunately, things only went downhill from there. You see, Sivir's an AD carry that relies mostly on her auto attacks to do damage, which means she needs a lot of gold. And even though I was by no means perfect, I was starting to figure that out. I was just doing so little damage while dying to pretty much anybody who even looked in my direction. But it was fine. With plenty of gold under my belt, I was finally ready to rejoin my team and do some serious damage. Even if I was still forgetting to use my barrier sometimes.
Well, I should have barriered, man.
But hey, a win's a win. But again, you just farm, you hit 2 to 3 items, and you become a late game beast. It doesn't matter how your early game goes. It doesn't matter how your early game goes was something I took way too seriously, seeing as I allowed myself to die multiple times in lane every single game so far. Even when I thought I had a guaranteed kill, it was like Sivir's throwing these plastic frisbees around and I was doing no damage. Even the minions were doing more damage than me.
You're kidding me, you stupid ass minions, man.
But through all my inting, I could see there were moments of greatness in my play. They weren't perfect, but I saw potential. And although I die at the end of this play, I was slowly starting to understand Sivir's limits. I was utilizing all of my abilities way more efficiently than before. I probably could have done a little bit better at dodging and kiting though. And like clockwork, once the late game rolled around, it didn't matter how much I had inted or what abilities I failed to dodge, I was a damage demon. That's when it dawned on me. If I was able to become a beast in the late game, even after falling behind early, imagine the possibilities if I didn't fall behind early. So I decided to do just that. To my surprise, by taking advantage of Sivir's early poke damage and wave management, for the first time since starting this challenge, I didn't fall behind, I actually had a bit of a lead. Once I got that early lead, Sivir was a lot easier. I was able to bully our lane opponents, which put me further ahead. And with so much gold under my belt, once the mid game rolled around, my team fighting was incredible, which led to my team securing more objectives, all while destroying the enemy bot lane. Sorry, Vayne and Shaco. From this point forward, I realized it wasn't so much that my early game didn't matter, it was more about securing a small early lead and then trying to suffocate my lane opponents. Even if I was still making some simple mistakes.
I'm dead, I'm an idiot.
There are moments where I would get ahead of myself and slightly misplay, but you gotta admit, I was starting to get the hang of Sivir. I even managed to use her spell shield perfectly in this fight, not panicking when Mel threw her root, but instead saving it for Bel'Veth's knockup. But even with my exceptional Sivir gameplay, I didn't forget what I learned in my first few games and continued farming to secure a lead. Even managing to bait another poor soul. I mean, this was a little overkill, right? But alas, seeing how powerful I had become on Sivir, the Riot gods decided to punish me and knock me down a few pegs right before my first ranked games. After these games, I realized Sivir's basically a minion vacuum. So I did some research on YouTube and here's what I found. 1. Sivir's W is an auto attack reset. It's not a huge deal, but it gets you a little bit more damage in lane and in teamfights. If you crit somebody, auto attack reset and crit them again, you do a surprising amount of damage. 2. Sivir is a short-ranged AD carry, but her W makes her long range. Let me explain. You're not going to really be able to hit the enemy carries or dash on top of them like some other bot laners, but you can use your W to auto attack the tank, which will eventually bounce and hit the carries. I would often miss position and try to hit a carry directly, but playing front to back is actually how Sivir hits the backline. 3. Have a plan on what you want to spell shield before a fight. Basically, if you're against a Morgana, for example, save your E for her Q, and don't waste it on a random ability like a Lucian W or something like that. This makes it way easier to play out fights because you know exactly what you want to play around instead of trying to react in the moment or panic and press your E too early. 4. Sivir doesn't outscale hypercarry AD carries, but she does scale faster. So, like, you're not gonna outscale a Jinx or a Kog'Maw or a Vayne, but you will hit your late game power spike way before them because of your amazing wave clear. 5. Your laning phase should focus on pushing and having lane priority. You push waves better than any AD carry in the game, so literally just spam your W and Q and push the enemy under tower. If they stand too close to the minions, you'll poke them with your W and Q, which makes it harder for them to farm, and if you run out of mana, you push waves so quickly you can instantly recall and get back to lane before you lose any minions. 6. However, despite her faster scaling and great pushing, you still need to be careful in the early game because you're not a bully by any means. You are vulnerable to ganks, you can run out of mana if you don't reset properly, and you need at least 2 items to be a real threat. And with that, on to some ranked games. Heading into my first ranked game, I needed to apply the mindset I developed during my normal games, where I wasn't just okay with falling behind early game. Luckily for me, I was off to a great start. Looking back these past few games, I really felt like I had settled into a groove where I was able to choke my opponents out of lane by consistently pushing waves and poking them under tower, only to finish them off when they overstepped and I would secure myself a lead. But as I'm about to find out, the biggest problem with having this much lane pressure is that you run out of mana so fast, which leaves you vulnerable in lane sometimes. But as long as I kept that in mind and didn't overextend my lead, things would work out fine. A great example of not keeping this in mind is here, where I find a pick early but overcommit to another fight instead of just crashing the wave, only to get ganked by the enemy jungler, die, and lose my entire advantage. Even after I respawned and returned to lane, I was no longer able to apply that constant pressure and was instead forced to sit back under my turret. Unfortunately for me, the laning phase only got worse from there, and it didn't help that I was also trying a new build right now. You see, one of the biggest problems with Sivir is her initial cost of entry, or as I mentioned before, you need a lot of gold to get started. So falling behind is not an option if you want to be useful. So instead of going Yuntal into Infinity Edge, which costs 6,450 gold, I decided to build Essence Reaver and Navori Flicker Blades, which is only 5,555 gold. That's nearly a 1,000 gold difference. As I'm about to find out, if you're in a matchup where you are bound to get bullied early, going the Essence Reaver build can help you survive the laning phase by giving you a cheaper build path, lots of extra mana, and great wave clear which neutralizes the lane. Even though I had one of the worst performances of any 10-hour challenge so far, I knew I needed to give this build another chance. I just needed to focus on farming and not falling behind. As I said earlier, if I just focused on using my new source of mana for poke, this build might actually be good. Not to mention much, much cheaper. Out of nowhere, it felt like I was once again starting to grasp Sivir and her potential.
A summoner has disconnected.
It would not be a 10-hour challenge without at least one of these, right? Unfortunately, in the time our jungler disconnected, the enemy team got Cloud Soul, then Baron, which led us to frantically trying to stop them getting Elder Dragon, which they ultimately got anyway. But I'll be damned if I'm going to sit idly by and let them end the— You know what though? Even with the odds stacked against us, this game felt pretty winnable. But honestly, the previous game left such a sour taste in my mouth, I was excited to jump into my next game and prove that I could truly succeed on Sivir. Fuck, I'm dead. Maybe too excited. I kind of just jumped right back into it. I was making a ton of dumb mistakes that weren't even Sivir or build related, they were more E-core related. Exactly as I had said earlier in the video, Sivir being able to push waves super fast meant that I would overextend sometimes without even realizing it, and making silly mistakes like in this team fight, missing a Q on a stationary target. Like, Ecor, how did you miss that? Despite all the silly mistakes though, I still had moments where I played well and allowed myself to flourish. But I have to say, Sivir is interesting to me because unlike most of the other AD carries I've played so far, during the laning phase, I felt more comfortable with poke and enchanter supports than tank supports. Let me explain. There are two big reasons as to why I felt this way. One, I've already spoken about this a bit, but due to the extra mana received from Essence Reaver, I'm able to sit back and poke from far away. Paired with a support who's good at also poking, we're just tickling the enemy lower and lower until we can secure a kill. 2, Sivir has such good inherent survivability, most of the time I feel safe even when I'm by myself. Think about it, she has an ult to gain movement speed and run away, a spell shield on a pretty low cooldown, and amazing wave clear so I can reset whenever I need to. It's just so weird because normally I love tank supports due to my aggressive playstyle, but having an enchanter to scale with me and help me in lane was really nice. Although with how aggressive I play, maybe I do need a tanky support. Like, what am I even doing here? Oh, I do still appreciate tank supports, like in this game right here, where there are so many enemies that want to jump on top of me. Braum being there to peel and give CC as a sort of engage was just so nice. I mean, imagine if Braum didn't jump in and save me from Yasuo here. At least I redeemed myself from the previous game. Even though I just said I like enchanter supports more, this game was looking really good with a tank support. But the silly Ecor mistakes slowly started to creep up again, and in my bright genius, I decided to roam mid as an AD carry.
I accomplished nothing here.
And even a small mistake like roaming mid can have deadly consequences when playing AD carry. If this Vayne played a little bit better here and didn't die, my lead would have been completely destroyed. Luckily, I did trade back a kill and didn't fall too far behind. Unfortunately, that's kind of the story of this game. I would extend my lead by getting a kill or two, only to give those kills back by getting ganked or making a silly mistake. Like here, I followed Rel after pushing the wave just to get jumped by the enemy team. Playing with a tank support just makes me want to play aggressive most of the time, which leads to some questionable plays. Luckily, I did have a small lead pretty much the entire game, and I wasn't entirely useless. When push comes to shove though, I still love fighting with tank supports. Something about having a tank in front of me engaging a fight is so natural to me. If they go into attack mode, I start spamming attacks and abilities and we usually win the fight.
Huge, man!
By this point in the 10-hour challenge, I realized it was time to completely change my Sivir mentality again. I know, it's the third time, so I came up with a new plan called balls to the wall. You see, around the time that I decided to change my build to the much cheaper Essence Reaver build, I made the conscious decision to no longer fight for a lead and instead inch towards it slowly. And although my conscious choices were for scaling and playing safe, my actions told a different story. I was still playing like I initially had with the crit build, where I'd play aggressively to get a lead, and once I'd have it, I'd go balls to the wall. Basically, I'd throw everything I have at this build and try to snowball super hard. It was volatile and sometimes I'd lose lane, but it did make it easier to snowball to victory if I got a lead. And if you're paying attention to the background footage during this revelation, you'll notice that although I am very capable of getting a lead, maintaining it is a lot harder, as my current build just doesn't have as much firepower as the crit build. So during hour 7 of the Sivir challenge, I said fuck it, and went back to the original build to execute Operation Balls to the Wall. Immediately into my first game of Operation Balls to the... Yeah, okay, I'm gonna stop saying it. I could feel I was playing way more calculated and not overheating for every possible kill. And I'm not just saying that to thicken the plot. You can listen to 10-hour Ecor yourself.
Jesus Christ, that was close. Trust me, I've played a lot of Jinx. I know exactly what it feels like to overheat a little bit, let me tell you.
As I mentioned, once I got a lead, I would suffocate the enemy. Once I returned with a BF sword, the bullying only continued from there, and Operation you-know-what was in full effect. It got to the point where the enemy bot lane wasn't even allowed into the lane anymore. I alone was the arbiter of our lane, and if they wanted minions, I would have to allow it. Okay, that might have been a little close. You want to invade our jungle and get a cheeky kill or two? Under whose authority? Because I don't remember allowing that to happen, and for your transgressions, you will pay dearly. My word is absolute, and today I say, you die. Okay, I think you get the point. The extra attack speed and damage from the crit build just felt so natural to me. My attacks felt fluid, I was hitting like a truck, and I felt unstoppable. Essentially, it just felt nice to be useful again. I was doing tons of damage with my little frisbees, and I was pushing my leads as far as I wanted and snowballed the game to victory. I was able to forge my own path as soon as I got a lead and truly take matters into my own hands. Because once we got that initial kill, we would bully the enemy and make our lead as big as possible. Even when I was left alone in lane in a 1v3 situation, about to get tower dove, I'm sure the enemy thought this was gonna be a nice free kill. I was able to bring it back, outplaying the Fizz and even killing him in the process. Just look how close this was. I just felt so much more confident with my Sivir plays. Sure, I played a little too close this fight, but I had both sums and all my abilities. I knew I could outplay the situation, even if I probably didn't need to use everything here. Unfortunately, even someone like Faker has a bad game sometimes, where maybe you just underperform, or have a 1 in 10 Yasuo on your team, or someone goes AFK in a winnable game. But in these moments, what defines a great League of Legends player is not whether or not you win an unwinnable game, but instead whether or not you kept trying despite the odds. When the game didn't start off super great, I wasn't going to wallow in my own defeat and sit by as the enemy beat us. I was going to try my absolute hardest to get back in the game and win. Sometimes though, there really isn't much you can do. Like not buying items out of base. Definitely not an accident, totally taking control of my own destiny here. Yeah, not buying items allowed me to buy my BF sword faster than ever and take over the game harder. With this early power spike, I was able to dominate my lane, especially thanks to my support's aggressive playstyle, which only made me more aggressive, more confident, more balls to the... well, you know the rest. Sivir was finally starting to feel fun, and I was finally starting to do some serious damage. There is absolutely nothing that could... This match was interesting. For the most part, we were all ahead, just Shen was experiencing some internet issues. He would leave for a brief moment and then reconnect. He even reconnected right in time to save me in this fight with Jinx here. So even though portions of the game were 4v5, this match was a perfect example of how dominant Sivir can be if you just continue farming for free. Literally nobody on the enemy team could get in my way. So even though the 10 hours of Sivir were up, I was feeling a little unsatisfied, and I knew I could have one more match and absolutely pop off. My final game as Sivir AD carry did not start off very great.
First blood.
And that was the last time I saw Lux in lane. Unfortunately, she decided to just roam the entire laning phase, leaving me in a 1v2, where all I could do is throw my frisbee and catch waves for as much gold as possible. Until about 9 minutes. I finally got tower dove by Vayne and Swain, and although I survived the initial tower dive, I wasn't so lucky next time. I did get a kill back at least. I just kept getting pushed further and further behind, and it eventually got to me. It got to the point where I was so underpowered that I could probably breathe on the enemy and do more damage. During this last game, the final 15 minutes of the match, I didn't utter a single word. I sat there in complete silence as I got bullied over and over and over again. I know usually these videos end on a much more positive note, but unfortunately that just wasn't the case today. But I guess that's what you get queuing up for a 10-hour challenge like this one. Oh yeah, I stream pretty much every day on Twitch, so drop a follow, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps me out a ton.